Go, go. Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up.
And there she is. We can see her face.
Hello.
All right, Kayla. You may remember Kayla last year from Com Week. She assisted in hosting an event with us as well, and she had the opportunity to interview Turn Me Up Josh. And again, we want to thank you, Kayla, so much for your contribution to the School of Communications. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and pass it over to you. Ms. Kayla Shote will be interviewing Mr. Prentice Penny. You may have seen him on Uncorked with HBO Insecure. If you've missed out, you've definitely missed out on a good one. This was the last season, and if you've ever taken a class with Miss Mitchell, you all know that we kind of use some of those clips as discussion pieces, for class. So I look forward to checking out this interview with you, Miss Kayla. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to open off Communications Week with a bang. We do have executive producer, showrunner, Prentice Penny. He's worked with so many different companies such as Insecure. He's worked on Girlfriends. He's worked on Uncorked with Netflix. Prentice, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Los Angeles. Went to film school at USC. Had a lot of, I didn't really know growing up that this was like a career you could do really until, representation really matters in that way, because even though I grew up in LA, I didn't know anybody who worked in the entertainment business at all. I think the closest person I knew was like my grandmother had a cousin who was like one of the Price is Right models that would like showcase stuff. And so I didn't know anybody. And it really wasn't until Spike Lee, he'd write these books every movie when he was doing like She's Gotta Have It in School Days and Do the Right Thing. He kind of put out like a journal, which was like the script and kind of like his thought process as he was making these movies. And in these diaries, he would talk about having gone to NYU Film School. And that was my first time ever hearing of the word film school. And but I was like, oh, there's a school that does this. So it made me obviously want to check it out and go. And so I kind of followed in that same path, which is different than now when you can see people like myself or Lena Waithe, or you see people who are doing, if you want to be a television writer, Chandra Rhimes, there's plenty of people you can point to now and who you can identify. But when I was starting out, that just wasn't the case. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's sort of how I got started.
Does answer the question. And you were just mentioning how Spike Lee, I guess, was one of your role models or somebody who you idolized. Who else did you idolize to help you want to get into the film industry?
It was mostly, I would say in the beginning, I would say it was mostly Spike, just because I didn't know anybody. I think, and also as I got into, I took like a summer workshop class in high school at USC, and there they told me about, this was like the summer of 1990. So I was like 15 years old or something. And then when I was there, they were telling me that another Black student had just graduated and he had a movie coming out next year, which was John Singleton, but Boys in the Hood wasn't out yet. So I didn't know who that was, but just the fact that there was somebody who had just graduated film school who was Black, and I wanted to go there, made it even more of a thing. So obviously once I got, the next year when I started college, Boys in the Hood had come out that summer. And so it felt very inspiring going into the school to be like, okay, wow, I can like, at least this path is not new, you know what I mean? Even though there wasn't a lot of us. But I would say those were the two, I think, going into film school in terms of people that look like me.
It seems as though you've always have been very inspired and confident in your own skills. Has there ever been a time where you doubted whether or not you would make it in this industry?
That's a daily battle. Even today, like there's still, it's always new things to climb, right? So, I've been working now going on 1904 is when I got my first job. So 18 years. And you still, you're always, I don't know any writer that's not insecure who's like good, who's like worth their salt. So you're always battling those voices in your head on a daily basis. You're always battling challenges. You certainly get to new levels where you're like, okay, I've done this, right? It's like school, right? You're like, okay, I've graduated first grade, right? I know 2+2, I know my ABCs or whatever. I don't even know if that's first grade. I'm so off. But the idea is that you accomplish something at some level, and then there's more to go, right? So I would say that like there are things that I don't doubt about myself anymore, and then there are things that I continue to doubt, right? So they're just daily, and yearly and monthly challenges. So I don't think that ever leaves you. I think the things that you were insecure about maybe year 2 of your career, you're not as insecure about. Like I don't worry about like, oh, I can't get a job anymore, but that used to be a real worry. I don't worry about that anymore. There are other things that I worry about, right? So yeah.
So that kind of plays into a bit, right, of the idea of like the American dream and always wanting more. Once you achieve one thing, you want to be able to surpass that. So do you feel as though you will ever get to a place where you're fully confident and comfortable in where you are and feel like I've made it to where I want to be?
That's a good question. I mean, I think Issa and I always talk about this. We always talked about this when we were making the show, which was, we said there's no like, we said Issa at the beginning of the show was a character that wanted to wipe away her insecurities, right? The things that she was insecure about. And we said that the end of the show needed to be an Issa who was secure in her insecurities, right? Knowing that they never kind of leave or new ones pop up and you're never going to eradicate yourself from it, right? Kind of, I guess, how we're feeling in COVID, I guess. But that same sort of, energy of like, these things don't leave you, your fears don't leave, these things don't leave. And so I would say that there are things that I want to accomplish. Will I accomplish all those things? I don't know. But I think as long as I know I'm trying to, right, I can be at peace with if you fall short, right? It's just like if you're playing sports, right? It's like, well, you don't want to lose the game, right? But if you felt you did everything you could to win, well, then sometimes you take your victories where you take them and you say, okay, I didn't get here, but I got this, and this, or I surpassed it. I mean, there are things that I think I came into the business wanting to do that I've certain ways surpassed, like way surpassed. Then there are new things that came up that I go, oh, well, this is like a new interesting thing, right? Like, because there are so many things you just don't know when you're starting out, right? It's just like, when you start college and you're in the beginning and you're like, okay, I want to just make sure I graduate, I this, I that, whatever. But then new things come up, right? Or new challenges come up or new opportunities come up. You go, I didn't think I'd be interested in that, or I thought I'd be interested in this, but I'm actually weirdly more interested in this thing over here, right? And so you're still on the path of where you're trying to go, but little, kind of going off the path in certain ways kind of becomes part of the journey too. And then those become new things that you have to try to do. So I would say that like, I hope I get there. I mean, the plan, that's the plan, but I think I'll be at peace knowing that like I did everything I could. So that's why I tell my kids and tell people I work with, like, let's go out and try to be great today. So we can try to do the things we need to do. We may not always get there, but that has to be like the North Star.
And with trying to follow that North Star and trying to follow your path to greatness, what specific insecurities did you have to overcome in order to be where you are now? What obstacles did you have to rise above?
I mean, I think in very simple one in some ways is like, am I good enough? Am I talented enough? There's a ton of obviously like just opportunistic stuff, right? Which is just like people having more opportunity than us, right? So like taking that off the table, because that's true of any field, right? So just personally, always, am I talented enough? Am I, if I share this writing with somebody, are they gonna critique it? Is it gonna, will it make me feel I'm not good enough? I mean, that thing we sort of all battle that I think from a writing standpoint, because it's so personal, right? You're putting so much of your creativity, yourself in these things. And if they don't go right, I know for me, which I'm constantly in therapy about, is like, it's no indictment on me, right? Personally, right? But that doesn't mean that when we share things, that's the thing. When you share your art, you're at risk of like, whatever. So you're at risk of critique and all these things. And so I would say that was one of the ones I had to overcome initially, because it would almost make me, I would say I would spend too much time on it, trying to like perfect it so much. And there's a time for that. But there's also a time where you have to like let it go, let people see it, and like be open to all that stuff, right? Because that's the only way it's going to get better, right? Like iron sharpens iron. And so I had to keep trying to be around more iron. And with that more iron comes people who are talented, right? And then that comes with like being vulnerable. So I think all those things lead to like just the question of, are you good enough? And are you willing to push yourself to be that, right? Because those are two different things, right? Not everybody wants to push themselves to be good enough. Some people are just kind of happy being where they're at. And that's fine. It's not a knock. It's just they're different people that have different things and different things they want to do that work for them. That wasn't going to work for me. So that's why it kept paralyzing me, because I had to get past that because it wasn't enough for me.
Well, this audience here, speaking for the audience, we're definitely an audience that we want to push ourselves forward and see how hard we can push ourselves, and what just wanting to get over the finish line and crossing that finish line. And something that college students often struggle with when it comes to self-doubt is self-doubt in the sense of getting internship opportunities. We may doubt ourselves, oh, are we good enough compared to the other peers that we're competing against? So what is your take on applying for internship opportunities and beating out the competition?
In terms of, I interned every year in college. In my summer time, it was hard in the school year just because there was so much to do. But there were a couple times it would carry over to like the early part of the fall. But I just found sometimes it was too hard. But I would intern every summer at different production companies, and I think in terms of beating out the competition. So I'm not really sure. I guess depending on your field, I'm not sure how.
But like getting the internship, because there's so many times where so many other schools are competing for the exact same internship as you. How can you make your resume stand out? How can you beat out and actually secure that internship opportunity?
Yeah, I would say, look, that's a tough question to answer, because obviously your resume is only like based on what you can do. So I would say, but my answer would be slightly different in that it's tough for me to say like how to get this thing versus this. What I can say is, when you get internship opportunities, I can speak probably more accurately to this thing, is that I think one thing that's very important is do the little details. I've worked with a bunch of production assistants and interns and people who, when you're in that position, so I graduated from college thinking, okay, great. I graduated from college. I've done that. Like, I don't have to do the grunt work anymore in some way. And it was very arrogant of me in some way to think that, and that could not be further from the truth. It's almost like, I feel like your grunt work is just kind of beginning. You just have a degree, which is, you have to have that, right? But your grunt work is kind of now just really starting in the real world. You're starting over, right? And so in a lot of ways, for me, I've seen a bunch of assistants come in and think, okay, I've got the assistant job, now I'm here, and that's enough. And it's not. I've seen, and this is small, like, if you don't do the little things right, people won't trust you with big things. And I've seen assistants when the lunch order is wrong. This is like a small example, but it's a big thing. Like in the writer's room, lunch is everything. It's the one thing we get for free. So you're like, you want your lunch to be right? So I've seen assistants come in, the lunch is wrong, it's repeatedly wrong, and then wonder why they don't get opportunities, right? Because they feel they're above doing lunch, right? So, and I've seen assistants who the order came back, it was like mayo on the sandwich. The writer said, it's okay. The assistant said no, took the sandwich back, brought the sandwich again. The sandwich was still wrong, said, no, I'll go back again, went back again. And then, and obviously the assistant at that point said, I'm going to make sure from here on out, before I leave, I check every single order, right? But just that assistant went back 3 times and this other assistant would repeatedly mess up lunch, that assistant that would always go back is one that we continue to promote, right? Because what they said was, by saying that, was no matter how many times I have to do this, I will get this right, no matter what, right? And the other assistant said, I'm in this position and I'm not utilizing this position the right way, right? And we've promoted, like this woman that was my assistant the first year on the show, she's now a showrunner. She's running Issa's new show, Rap Shit, that'll be on HBO Max, right? So she just continued to rise up as my assistant, and we hired her eventually as a writer's assistant, and we hired her as a writer, right? And so, but she continued to prove herself at every level because she used that opportunity the right way. We had another assistant, the second year of the show, we had a contest of like 2 friends who could like come on and like, matter of fact, they went to Howard, and one of their names is Kinsey Young. And Kinsey won the contest, was a PA on set. No matter what I needed, anytime, she would ask me every morning, do you need anything? Do you want anything? 3 times a day. Do you need anything? Do you want anything? And so when my assistant had to go out of town one time, she subbed in as my assistant. Same thing. She was great that 1 week. She was my assistant. We hired her in the writer's room, eventually hired her as a writer. She's on a new show on NBC called Grand Crew. And I just hired her to help run a show I'm developing now. So like, those are the things when you get in these doors and you get these opportunities, do not be above anything. Like, that's what I would say more so than, it's hard to say how to get those things, but when you get those things, do not like waste those opportunities.
So it's like you're really big on networking and not building bridges, but in fact, continuing and not burning bridges, but in fact, continuing to build them and keeping in contact with the people who have helped you get to where you are. Who are some of the people
I would say sure, but less than that, right? Like I really can't impress upon, do the job that you're there to do. Do not be there to do the job that you're like, oh, I'm doing this job, but I'm only here to get this. That may be true. That may be true, but you can't do the job that way. If that happens, that is a byproduct of the job you are focused on currently. So I can't impress enough. Like, networking is fine, but you can only network with people who allow you to be in their network. But if you're not doing the job right, you will not be in the network to network, right? So I just really want to impress that, like, whatever job you're there to do, hustle harder than anybody who else is in that job, because that also shows, right? Be the most enthusiastic coffee getter there is. Be the most attentive person to make the files, to make the copies. Be the most attentive person organizing the Zooms. Like, whatever the menial task is, do it perfect, because I promise you, it goes so far, you have no idea.
Wow, I think that's very, very valuable advice. So thank you for that. And are there any people in your lifetime? This is a college seminar, and oftentimes when it comes to networking, our teachers will tell us, wow, some of these people in your class, they could be the people hiring you one day, or they can be the people that are gonna help you get to where you need to be. Are there certain people in your life or connections that you've made that have helped you get to where you are now?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the list is so long to name, but speaking, like, for example, my attorney is a friend of mine that I've been friends with since I was like 12 years old. And a matter of fact, our parents went to, his father's a judge, my mother's a judge. They actually went to law school together as well. So it was just kind of a weird thing that we grew up together, and now he represents me as my attorney. But in college, absolutely, there was a little group of us, the Black film students at USC at the time we were there. We would call ourselves like the clique. And there were like writers, there were directors, there were actors, and we'd all help each other be in each other's like stuff. And then there are so many great ways in which those connections have happened. So there was a friend of mine in my class named Dana North. And so she was a drama writer. So when she had worked on other shows like Veronica Mars and Any Day Now and a bunch of other shows. And so Soul Food. And so when I got Insecure, I hired Dana to come work on my show. And again, I met Dana when I was 17. And Dana's now, she has her own company at Sony. She's running the Best Man TV show that's going to come on. And she actually hired to be as her executive to like run her company was a friend of ours named Michelle, who was a film student on the like executive side. So we've all, and we still all talk, we still help each other, we've cast each other in different stuff, you know, like professionally, written on the stuff that we've, you know, so it's like just that group continues to stay close, and continue to all employ each other in a very real way. And again, these are friends we know since we were, you know, 18, 19 years old.
Oh, wow. So the connections that you make now really, really do come back around 360.
Absolutely. And the world's so small now, you know, obviously social media wise, digital wise, the world is so connected in a way that it wasn't, you know, even 20 years ago, right? So you can get to anybody, you know, now you can just be like, oh, Instagram, you're in this sorority, you're in this group, or you're in this, you know, whatever. I know this person, you know what I mean? Like the world is just so connected now that absolutely those things are so important. Even just having like your own, like even just your school, but then your school being a bunch of HBCU, right? All those things like all then that's a universe, right? And then all the Black connections within the HBCU universe, right? And so that's in and of itself, right? Its own hive in its own great way. So I would say absolutely these things are important.
And I understand that the film industry is a small world when it does come to Black people. And I know you have been very vocal when it comes to quote unquote Hollywood's whitewashing. Can you expand upon that and how Black people are creating and paving a way for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the Hollywood whitewashing stuff is kind of, I mean, my point about that was, are you talking about the article I wrote?
Yes.
So I wrote that article, that was in the wake of like all the stuff happening with George Floyd. And what was happening around that time was like a lot of white TV shows and showrunners like Tina Fey and Bill Lawrence, who I actually worked for on Scrubs, were asking to take down some of their blackface episodes. And I just thought that was kind of disingenuous. I was like, you can't be an ally if you really want to be one without having this kind of ugly conversation of how this happened in the first place, right? And so my point of that article was that the reason why these things happen is because there's not enough color in the writer rooms, right? Like I've been in these writer rooms where obviously on shows like Girlfriends or Insecure, it's obviously heavily us, but I've been on these other shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Scrubs and Happy Endings, and where I was the only Black person in the room, right? And so I was saying that's kind of the problem, right? Is that there you get one and you think, okay, I've done the job, and I was like, but that exists in the guilds, it existed. So it's like it's no different than it's a microcosm of America, right? So the higher up you go, you go look at the Supreme Court and go, oh, there's one Black person there. You know what I mean? You can look anywhere and kind of say like the higher up you go, right? The thing. So that was my pretend that it's a systemic problem, obviously. So that was my thing there. And I would say like as a community, we try to be super tight and connected. Obviously there's like groups that are just, you know, closer by, maybe they're drama writers, maybe they're Black comedy writers, and, you know, kind of everything, you know, but I would say as a collective, I don't think there's anybody that like somebody in that universe couldn't get to, even if you don't know them. You know, 1 degree person that knows them, right? So I would say that like, and I would say now more than ever, I think back in the day, you would feel like you couldn't always partner together because they wouldn't like, Hollywood wouldn't want to see like 2 Black teams. They'd be like, okay, we got to get like a white person to validate this thing, right? And I think now that's great because it's like, you know, that doesn't exist anymore. You know, I have a bunch of projects with all kinds of just other Black creators where we're just doing it together, right? So I think that's the thing I'm the most excited about.
So what steps would you say that Hollywood is taking right now in order to make sure to be more inclusive of Black creatives?
None.
Wow.
None. We are just doing it. So I don't know if there's anything they're doing. I mean, I think a lot of the things that I would say that they do is kind of cosmetic, but it doesn't really have real.
More of like a Band-Aid effect.
Yeah, it's just like in the moment, but it doesn't sustain itself, right? So, because it's not really getting in the roots. So I would say that like they're doing kind of what they do, but we're doing something different, which I think is the most important thing.
And I feel like a lot of people may have had the same reaction as me, kind of shocked when you said there's not too much that they're doing to specifically be inclusive of Black creatives. And when you look at Insecure and you look at Issa Rae's character and having her own nonprofit organization, her artist, Crenshaw, he actually wants to be more expressive and to truly showcase his art in the way he wanted to do it, but Issa's bosses were unwilling to allow him to express himself in the way he wanted to express himself. And once he went ahead and actually did the show how he wanted to do it behind Issa's Rae's back, and the white people originally who were on top of over Issa, they ended up loving what he did, but he had to, in a sense, go through some loopholes or in order to get where he was. So how does that work in real life? Would you suggest that students should go above their bosses' heads to still show their creative side? Or how do we really get a chance to showcase our talents if we're constantly being told that we're not able to fully express ourselves?
I would say every situation is, I mean, we did that episode to kind of showcase sometimes what that's like, right? When you're new, Issa was kind of new in this role. And what is that? We wanted to show like, okay, well, we've seen Issa struggle. What is it like to try to give her have her manage success, right? Because that's even more hard, right? And so for that, we were trying to say, okay, well, it's new. So how do you navigate this, right? She wants to be successful. She's torn about this, right? And I think her argument that she makes is a valid argument, right? Which is, let's like do this so we can do this. That's how we're all doing it, right? In some way, you're like, and I think Crenshaw's way is a way to do it too, right? I don't know if there's like a binary, you should do this or not do that. Every scenario, every moment, every time in your life requires a different action, right? Things you can do, the freedom you might have at 23 is different than the things you think about at 35 when you're married and with a kid, right? Which is different than how you can move when you're 60, right? And like every scenario just requires in your life, based on what you're going through, based on what's going on, like a different action, right? And so I would say that like you have to decide for you what is the best move for you. So I can't say I would be selling you wrong advice, because there are times in my career where I've had to like, again, when I was on those shows in the beginning, being the only Black one in the room, I was a younger writer. I didn't have a voice to be able to say, yo, this is like wrong. I'm barely there myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now I can joke about it and call it out, but I can't go in there and be like, because they're gonna be like, you fired. So then what did I do? Right. So you know what I mean? Like, so, but yeah, it's like there are times that you can do things and there are times you can't, right? And so for me, it was okay, once Insecure was there and I had a stronger voice to say something and I was more respected and more known, right? Because it's also like you only can do stuff as much. I'm not saying this, I'm just telling you for me, right? And I would say that like, I tried to use my voice at that time to call those things out, right? So hopefully that will have an impact, right? So even if I had to suffer through it in the same, and when I say suffer, I wasn't suffering like, you know, Rosa Parks, anybody in the 60s was suffering. I wasn't suffering like a slave. I was getting paid, you know what I mean? So I use that word very lightly. But, you know, it's like, that's kind of the point, right? So I can open doors and like other Black writers coming behind me don't have to go through that in the same way, right? So I think those were the moves that I had to make at that time that I thought was best for me, best for my career, best for me long-term, best to open doors, right? You know, you're trying to play chess a lot. And sometimes sometimes you make lateral moves to inevitably move forward, right? And I would say that's the game I think I was trying to play at the time, was based on where I was, based on how I could move, based on this, based on that. This is my best option, right? Yeah.
And we do have a question from the audience, and they are asking, how do you continue to have fun while working?
Oh, I mean, you still have fun. You still have fun. I mean, we have fun all the time. I mean, the job is, at least, you know, I think anybody who loves their job, it's fun. So yeah, I mean, I think we have fun calling it out. but I work with really cool and smart and funny people. So yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of fun. I would say, yeah. I mean, I would say like in life, right? Like right now, like it's COVID, Ukraine's crazy, things is happening. You still find ways to like enjoy life, right? And I think that's the same way.
And when it comes to enjoying life, how do you multitask? Because you are a father, a husband, someone's your son. How do you manage being someone to somebody while still having such a huge position that demands so much of your time?
I mean, I have a great, I mean, one, I don't know if I do it great, but I'm trying. But I would say that I have a really great wife. I have really great kids. I have a really great God. I have great people on my team in terms of at my company who represent me. So I mean, it's a village for all of it, right? My therapist is great. So I would say I don't have a lot of just me time, which I'm trying to find more for, because it just gets hard. I've definitely had to prioritize things in terms of like how I structure my day. I would say time is the one thing that I always say is the most important commodity, because time is the only thing that you can't buy. We're all gifted with the same amount, and that's rare in any life, right? Like I always say, like I'm never going to be 6'8" like LeBron or whatever. I don't have those gifts, right?
Yeah.
I don't have that. Everybody has different gifts, talent, skills, and ability. But the one thing we all have, everybody has different income. Everybody has different where they grow up, but everybody has 24 hours in the day. We all do. And it's how we use those 24 hours, right? Now, do you use that commodity to be like wasteful? Are you wasteful of that commodity? Do you like wake up at 11 and then kind of fart around? And of course, there are days like that. But I'm saying for the most part, if you don't, time is the only thing you cannot buy, you cannot earn, you are given it, and it's how you use it, how you work it, right? And I try to work my 24 hours smarter than I think a lot of people try to do. And I think if you're smart with your 24 hours, then other things can come out of those things, right? So I would say I have really great people, family, but I have a huge respect for time.
Wow, how the way you look at time, I think, is a way that a lot of people you put it in a sense to really make you look at time as less subjective and more as a thing that you're able to take control of. And I really love the way you put that. So what is the legacy that you want to eventually leave behind? What is your ultimate legacy when people think Prentice Penny 100 years from now? What do you want them to associate with your name?
It's funny you say that. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine about this, not about me, but just about these types of things. And I was like, I don't care, to be perfectly frank. And what I realized, what I meant by that was that what I've learned is like, take the most famous like singer in like 1942. Who is that person? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Who won like the Oscar in like 1956 for Best Actor? Nobody knows. Who cares? Nobody knows. Who cares, right? So what I've learned is like, it doesn't really matter, right? What matters is, because that's for other people to figure out. That's for other people to determine, right? Like I don't know. And I don't really care about that. What I do care about, right? What I've learned is you have what's the most important is who you impact right now. Because that's really all the people you know, right? It's like you could control this little, like the time you're here, impact people to be the best, to be as great, as kind, make it things be better than how they were when you got there, just while you're there. Because that's really all you can do. If people remember you, because they're not gonna remember you. Like I always tell my friends, like, we're like blades of grass. When the gardener cuts the blades of grass, those grasses are gone. You like, those grass aren't any more important than any other blade of grass in the grass. And you don't even think about blades of grass, right? That's what I mean by time. It's like, forget that over there. Right here is what matters right now. So I don't try to think about, I try to think about right now, how can I be helpful? How can I be good? How can I be kind? How can I make things better? Just right now. Because that's all I kind of care about.
Well, we really appreciate you giving us and dropping all these gems. Our last question, just to wrap this all up, would be what here and now, what would you tell graduating seniors that they should do now? What should we do in order to industry?
Yeah, I would say as you're going out in the world, I would say one, really, really, and I know it's hard to do when you're 21, 22 years old to think, excuse me, like you think you're gonna live forever, right? And I remember graduation so vividly, but I'm 48, right? And so I would say as you're going out into the world, really think about time. I mean, that's the expression, right? Like time is money, right? And it
Yes.
really is, right? Time, if you converted your 24 hours a day into hard dollars, how would you spend that 24? How would you spend that money, right? Now, if you wake up late, you basically just tricked off, $10, right? You're like, oh snap, I'm already down $10 and I just woke up, right? So that's what I mean is like really as you're going out to the world, have fun, be great, like be great stewards of the culture, right? Always be trying to help more Black people and people of color get in positions. But I would say, again, be kind, be good people. You can go out there, you can make money, you can go out there and be successful, but just be kind to each other. That's really, it seems silly, it seems very Mr. Rogers neighborhood, but I work with a lot of people who are successful and who are not kind. And I realize successful people who are kind, and the successful people who are kind have just a bigger lasting touch on people. And I would say, like, I was working with Issa, obviously, for 6 years, and she's one of the kindest people I've met, and incredibly giving, and is incredibly successful, right? So I would just say, as you go out to the world, like, get your money, get your bags, do all that, have fun, be good for the culture, but just be kind.
I think that's a message that we can all, take on in our daily lives. We want to thank you so much for joining us here during our 2022 Communications Week. We're so grateful that you were able to stop by and give us so much great information. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
This is exclusive. Go! Go! Nothing can stop me, I'm all the way up.